Jeff Harding here for PSTEC. Welcome everybody, and we really appreciate you showing up here. We have a lot of questions that came in before we scheduled the webinar, the actual schedule here today. So we're going to be going through some of those. You may be listening to this maybe just audio-wise. There are some slides. We are recording this, so you'll be able to go back, and I'll provide you with the link on that at the end here. If you did sign up and register as well, I'll email you that link. We do also have a PDF handout that'll go along with each of these sessions. This is a 3-session, let's call it an online workshop, because we really want to put you to work, all right? We're going to do some work today, and then after today, between now and the second session, the work's going to be up to you. This is all about eliminating holiday stress. Although we're using the holidays as a point of, or a target, if you will, for our stress and those other kind of issues, this can be used at any time. So bottom line is, this is Stress Be Gone with PSTEC. So I'm here with Tim Phizackerley. He's the founder and creator of PSTEC. How you doing, Tim?
I'm fine, Jeff. At least you can hear me at the moment.
Absolutely.
As ever, we've got some communications problems. I've had some broadband problems at this end. It's just seems to be the reality of where I live, but hopefully it'll survive the webinar. Okay,
sounds good. Well, we've done pretty well so far, though, actually, in the past, so hopefully so. If anybody has any question that is online, again, use the question box. Feel free to put it in there. And if we don't cover them, we'll make sure that we cover them later on offline. You'll also have a website during these 3 workshops as we go through this, where you'll be able to ask questions on the page as well and get some answers as you work through things. So again, we want you to work through this, not just listen and set it aside, but actually work through this. And now's the time to do it, as the holidays are coming up. This first session is about heading off stress before it pops up. That's what we're trying to do. Now, we'll be able to do that all the time, I don't know. But that's what our effort here is to do, is to be able to clear up those aspects emotionally and also go after the beliefs and the behaviors that are in there and shift those as well. This is a common problem, and it's having that stress in the moment. It jumps out at you, and you're not sure what to do in those moments. But what we're shooting here for, to help you along here, is to give you a different experience as you get through the holidays or whatever event you're going to be at, or in regular life. There was a wonderful portion of a lyric by Van Morrison that kind of summed it up really well. When you don't need to worry, there'll be days like this. When no one's in a hurry, there'll be days like this. When you don't get betrayed by that old Judas kiss, oh, my mama told me there'll be days like this. That's what we're going for, is what Mama said. Yeah, there will be bad times, but there will be good times too. We just want to increase those good times, I think, a little bit more. Again, that's what we're shooting for here. Common problem, like I said, is stress in the moment. Let's say you're on your way to a little get-together with several people, maybe 100 people, maybe just 2 people. The number but doesn't matter. And you're just a few minutes away from being there. You could force your way through and get the job done, whatever that means. But sure would be nice if you could just glide through the event, right? Or at least sweat a little less. Maybe allow the pounding of your heart to slow down. Heck, let's shoot for the moon, okay? Imagine being able to enjoy the event and be at your very best, or better. What we're talking about, again, is shifting your perceptions so that you can shift your experience. And that's exactly what you can do. You can change this upcoming experience from one of anxiety, panic, or nervousness to one that could empower you. And maybe even the other issue that may come up a lot is anger. All right, we've had some questions on that as well. You can create a new experience that builds your self-esteem. That's what this is about. You're going to create new experiences to begin a new life, so to speak, but one of confidence and personal peace. A lot of us have the wish to be in our best in all situations, but it just doesn't seem to occur, does it? Now, first of all, I want everybody that's listening here, don't feel bad. This is a dilemma for a lot of people. Let's be honest, most people, right? a lot of common questions came up, and I'll read those out for those that aren't watching, but they're on the screen. One of the first ones was, how do I keep from getting uptight about things? It's a very common issue that a lot of people are seeing out there. You even know it in advance, don't you? Before you even get there, you know it's going to be uptight. It's almost as if it's planned for you. Another question that came up is, how do I handle, or better yet, prevent getting sick the first few days of the holiday? I know those in the northern hemisphere, maybe it's the other way around, down south, the southern hemisphere, but in the northern hemisphere, it's the flu season. When winter comes, it's the flu season. We've got it all mapped out. We're going to, we'll stock up on whatever we use, whatever brand name cold thing you're going to use, or pills or whatever. We stock up because, hey, I'm going to get sick. All right? How do I handle that? One of the common questions where I left off was the things that came up, and I appreciate everybody that has shared some of these questions. The things I fear and that bother me make me feel like a pressure cooker. This person said, I'll be quiet for a while, mistakenly thinking I've got my feelings and emotions in check this time. So that was really interesting, I thought, because this person noticed that, well, I've been through this before, and I think when it comes to the holidays especially, we expect them not to go well. That may be part of the problem. But what we find in our experience is that it's ratified. It's justified. We have proof. But she said, I'll be quiet for a while, mistakenly thinking I've got my feelings and emotions in check this time. In my mind, I am doing a brilliant job of tolerating and humoring them. But then, that last straw or feather gets placed on my back, or a feather, like that. And I either explode in anger and list all the things they said or did to upset me, or seethe in resentment and not want to see or hear from the person or people for at least 6 months afterward. This is very common, so some of you may be listening going, yeah, I've been there, done that. All right. Another one that came up was, I have to be honest, with my schedule, I have not had time to practice PSTEC. I use my off time to be quiet, to go into meditation, do yoga, or read something uplifting. The problem is, there isn't enough off time. How do I train my mind to stop taking me down memory lane, basically to unpleasant memories? Now, so these are pretty common. Like I said, this is a problem that a lot of people have. And these are just a few of them so far. We're going to go through some more here today. The last question was interesting. How do I train my mind to stop taking me down memory lane? And the person's doing meditation, yoga, reading things that are uplifting, etc. And those are all fine. And I'm not saying replace one with another or anything like that. But what we're going to give you are some practices that you need to take time on. You need to make time for this. That doesn't mean you have to, like I said, replace everything else you're doing. No, but you might have to carve out some other time. You might have to make the time, at least if you want results. And that's what we're most concerned about, is results. We want to have the results. I know you want to have the results. So you have to carve out the time that we're going to talk about, and what I call with my clients is home play, the homework or home play that you're going to do between now and the next session that we have. Now, the usual solutions are things like just be positive, keep thinking positive, or keep setting goals. Keep affirming. There is no negative, there is no negative, there is no negative. Those kind of things. Or even there's just avoid the stressful situations like that. One of those common questions that I just mentioned, she said, well, I just won't see the people for 6 months. We can avoid the situations, we can avoid the people. But those kind of situations are ignoring the barriers that get in the way of your true ability to live in peace and joy. So what we're advocating here, what we're going to talk about here, Tim and I here, is trying something else. If you're still having stressful holidays and you're doing other practices, whatever they may be, but they're not quite there, that's not quite doing it, shift a little. Do these things that we're going to have you do, and do it as an experiment. Be open with this with yourself and take it on and go through this as we go through these sessions here. Bottom line here is Something is in your way, and it's the emotions. That's one of the aspects that are in the way. When we read these common questions that came up, most of them were about emotions. Some of them are on beliefs too, and we're going to cover that as well, beliefs and behaviors. But a lot of it was emotions. When we talk about stress, that's an emotion. Those are feelings that come up. It manifests in our body in different ways. Like when a webinar doesn't work properly. No, just kidding. Something is in your way. It's the emotions. If you have used PSTEC and the click tracks before, you know that focusing on memories and or imagined events that cause emotional pain are part of the solution. Most people that are listening now are familiar with that. Some may not be. So it may be the first time you've heard of PSTEC. But there is going to be some focus on memories. But quite often people make some of these following statements. I was talking about this with Tim just I think it was just yesterday or via an email. And he agreed. He says, wow, I have some of this people saying the same things to him on a regular basis. For example, I am told to be in the moment. Focus on the now. If I should stay in the moment, why focus on the past and click track on that? I've also had people say, I don't want to be negative and focus on the negative because, well, it just makes me more, negative, right? Besides, I'm uncomfortable thinking or even listening to the negative. And then another one I've heard is, I've heard that you can use PSTEC positive, so why bother with the negative? Let's get on with the positive, right? We want you to consider using PSTEC in the most effective way possible. Because when you do, we know you'll create some extraordinary experiences. That's what this is all about and why we put this together without any barriers either. Anybody can listen to this. Feel free to share this, by the way. Consider this. There is a purpose to allowing traumas, nightmares, and unpleasant feelings into awareness. But it's only to release them. See, the problem is people are saying, I don't want to focus on the negative. Well, we're not really focusing on it. We're just bringing it into awareness, and it's already there. If the physical manifestations, if you're sweating and getting nervous or sick, etc., your mind in some way, subconsciously at least, is already focusing on it. But you need to bring this into your conscious awareness. Not all of them, by the way, but some of them need to be brought up so that you can release them, to discover that they're not real and that there are alternative perceptions of peace and joy. That's what we're after here for you. That's what we're going to give to you. So we're not advocating that you just think about the negative, not at all. What we're proposing is that if you have these underlying or blatant negatives running through your subconscious and your conscious mind for that matter, it's very difficult for you to just think positive or state positive, and you can't ignore it. You think you are, but you're not. And what we're going to give you, even if you have other practices, is something you can integrate with those as well. When you think of dealing with negative and positive perceptions in your mind, think about it in terms of clean thoughts and emotions would be positive versus dirty ones. So you can think about it like a floor. It could be a floor in your home or any kind of floor. Now, you might have clean and dirty spots, positive and negative, like our minds, our subconscious and conscious minds. Sure, you can look at the clean spots and ignore the dirty spots and even declare, this floor is wonderfully clean compared to other floors. It's cleaner than it was before. Those kind of aspects. But that doesn't make it clean. And in reality, you may even end up slipping on the dirt that's on the floor, depending what kind of dirt it is, okay? This is a nice phrase, and I can't remember where I picked this up. When even misery, fear, and shame no longer offer any juice, then they no longer terrorize us into compliance, and we begin to wake in re-evaluating even the unthinkable from an entirely different perspective. So again, I know there's some people probably thinking, well, wait, I just want to be positive. Just be positive. Just be positive. That's what a lot of people out there tell us to do. I'm going to tell you, we're going to have you be positive, but not yet. Not quite yet. We will be using PSTEC Positive very soon, And we even have a special hypnotic track for eliminating stress in session 2 of this workshop. But using them at the right time will give you quicker, more effective, and long-lasting results. And that's what we're after. We want to build a strong foundation here. Before you move forward to using PSTEC Positive, consider the possibility that the reason people like to focus on the positive, quite often, all right, is because they don't want to look at their past. They don't want to look at the memories. They don't want to look at it because maybe it's embarrassing, it's painful, and they just rather leave it there on the floor or maybe sweep it under the rug if they will. However, keep this in mind. If there is a feeling or event that you would prefer to overlook, that event, that memory is likely to be the feeling or event and the feelings that go with it that need to be addressed the most. So if there's one that just keeps on coming up, bring it into your awareness, and we'll show you what to do with that. So as mentioned previously, like I said, with that dirty floor metaphor, all right, it's much, much more effective to add that nice polish with the positives, with the PSTEC Positive, with this upcoming hypnotic track we have for you. It's much easier to do that on the floor after you have cleaned up the dirty spots. Does that make sense? One last thought I wanted to also mention. As you go through this, be gentle to yourself. Those that are therapists, counselors, coaches, practitioners, encourage, keep reminding your clients. Everybody, be gentle. There's no need to change everything immediately. A lot of people want to change it, now. Sometimes that can happen. You never know. Sometimes there's more to it. Whatever the outcome or the result, whether it might take a little bit more, be gentle. Be nice. Keep moving through it gently. Okay. Let's get to work. Does that sound good? Or play. Okay. Like I said, we're using holiday stress situations as one example to expose the issues that get in the way of enjoying the season, but also of enjoying your life in general. All right? When you clear up, but if you focus just on this holiday stress issue for now, when you clear these up, many times the other stresses may clear up as well. So this process and what we're going to explain to you now is something that you can use on anything that's stressful. So that's why the title says "Stress Be Gone." It wasn't necessarily just for holidays. This is something that'll be available all year round to everybody. You can follow this with the PSTEC tools and be able to clear up those stresses. So let's focus on the holiday stress for now. All right. Now we're going to start with memories, and when it comes to memories, the first step we're going to give you here is to review each issue on a common holiday issues list, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. You're going to take a look at this list one at a time and make a written note of which ones apply. The purpose of this list is just to kind of jog the memory, to give you something more specific to look at rather than being too general. If you're saying, well, life is just stressful, not only are there some belief issues there, but it's a little too general. So we want you to try and narrow it down a little bit, and you may have several of these on this list because we put together from people's responses and our own thoughts what some of the common complaints are.
I think that's a really, really important point, and it's one of the reasons why Jeff wanted to put this together, especially for the holiday season, is that a lot of people, as they face sort of Christmas and New Year, they have a sort of a general feeling of doom or dread, and it doesn't need to be that way. The whole point of splitting things up into a number of separate issues, and like I said, Jeff, from the questions that have been sent, and Jeff and I put our heads together to create this list of things to work through, is that by breaking it down into smaller chunks, it makes it manageable. So the idea being that you chip away at each chunk, and thereby remove the sort of general feeling of anxiety about that holiday period. Now, as Jeff's explained, The same principle could be applied to anything, and that's another reason Jeff wants to do this, is because it's a practical illustration of how to use these tools in an everyday sense by focusing on one thing. It's very common for people, because there's all sorts of stresses that occur at this, well, not this time of year, but the upcoming time of year, which apply to many, many people. By breaking it down into smaller, manageable chunks, you can work through it and get rid of that sort of general feeling of dread or doom that a lot of people have. I mean, I don't know what it's like where Jeff lives, but certainly here, it's very common to talk to somebody and they'll say, "Oh, I hate Christmas," or "I absolutely hate, I can't stand that time of the year because there's just so many things." Obviously not everybody's like that. Some people look forward to certain aspects of it and not others. But it's not an ideal place to be. We want people to be able to look forward to the holiday season and feel good about it and not worry about the things that have maybe been a problem in the past. So that was the whole point of the PDF that accompanies the webinar and the sort of list of bullet points that Jeff's put together, is that by breaking it down, you get rid of that general sort of monolithic anxiety that some people face.
Yeah, and I think one of the fears people have is if they go through a list like this, and I'll read these off here in a little bit, and then you'll have them in a PDF as well, like Tim said, is if they do look at it and they see, let's say, I've got 10 or 20 things, it begins to be a bit overwhelming, thinking, well, I can't do all of this at once. And that's the point. You don't need to do it all at once. Just pick one or some. And a lot of times when you, let's say there's 10 of them that do apply to you, and you start working on maybe just one or two, quite often the other 10 begin to crumble as well. Because that mind model that held everything in place for all those 10 items no longer is applicable. So the other ones, a lot of times, seem to go away as well. Now, not always. Maybe you do have to go through all 10. If you do, one at a time. If you don't, if you need to go through 5 out of 10, then go through 5. Maybe it's 1 or 2. Everybody's different. But like Tim said, it's very important to address this in a manageable way, I guess you could say. So the common holiday issues or stresses, I'll read these off to you. And again, you'll have them in a PDF. I'll have that available. Those that are on the call right now, I'll make it available probably, after we're done here, within a few hours. More things to do. Parties, shopping, wrapping, cooking. I'm sure that list could go on, even more and more so. The days seem shorter, shorter days, less time. Hey, I got all these things to do. Now the days are shorter. I know some people really despise going back to standard time because with daylight savings in the U.S. or summertime in the other places, it gave you an extra hour or so of daylight. It seemed longer, which is kind of funny. It's still 24 hours. Anyway, all right. Common holiday issues: extra food, extra giving, gifts, cards, etc. Making sure my clients get something as well as my friends, family, being sure everyone's covered. Because you don't want to leave anyone off the list. Heaven forbid, right? Extra activities, as if that wasn't enough, right? That just kind of covers everything, I think. Dealing with people I normally avoid. I know people that get together with their closest family once a year. And that's kind of dreaded as well. Dealing with people, I'm sorry, I already read that. End of the year crunches, taxes, bookkeeping, cleanup, thank you cards, the list goes on. More time off affects my regular flow. And then I got to go back to my boring lifestyle anyway. I had it made in my regular life, and now I've got a ton of other things to do as well. So people get knocked out of that habitual way of moving through life. Here's some that can completely going away off that kind of subject. I lost someone I used to spend holidays with, and now I'm alone, and I miss them. Dealing with very crowded places. You know, Tim said, I don't know what Christmas is like over in Hawaii, and it's a little less Christmassy, if you will. It's just not quite the same when, you know, it doesn't get down below much 78, 75 degrees. Some places it does. But there's still people shopping, absolutely. And, well, if you go to Honolulu, it's like California. But I grew up in Los Angeles and still go back to visit family. And it's still just as crowded, especially around the holidays. All right, more common holiday issue stresses. Parties and alcohol. Sometimes the alcohol is meant to, what? Help the stress, right? You know, reduce the stress. How's that working for you? Pressure to conform. Again, and that goes along with the gift giving, along with, well, I've got to do certain things. It is the holidays. They'll think I'm a Scrooge, or, you know, etc. Waiting in line, or queuing, as Tim called it. Spending time with people I genuinely hate. Let's be honest, okay? I don't just avoid them. I hate them. Now, this can be a real problem in families, and especially so in the families where the likes of abuse have been covered up to save face. So, could be some issues there. Cold weather, holiday season infections. Talked about some of the sickness issues with those other questions. And feelings of isolation and loneliness. So those are just a few. I think it pretty much covers everything. So our first step in this is, when it comes to this process, and we want to address the emotions and really clean the floor well, review those common holiday issue lists. Note which ones apply and which ones don't. Step 2, next to each of those issues, imagine in your past this issue occurring, whatever it is. So, for example, let's say, all right, I have more things to do, such as I have to do the Christmas decorations, let's say. Oh, I got to drag those out. They're in the attic. It's all dusty. I got to drag those out. I got to bring them down. I got to set them all up. It's only up for 2 weeks. I got to take them down. I got to box it up. I got to put it back. All right. So imagine in the past doing this. You've probably done it maybe 100 times. Well, maybe not. Hopefully not that many times. You've done it several times. Okay. When you think about the memories and doing it in the past, write that down. When did it last occur? Did it occur more than once? When? When was the first time it occurred? When was the most intense memory you had of that you had an issue? What are the feelings that come up, and how do you rate them, 0 to 10? Do you have a memory in that area, in that holiday list area of stresses, that you wish never happened? Again, just let those memories come up. Just let them come up. Jot them down. Just write it down. You may have more than one. You may only have one. Maybe you have several. If you say, well, I have 100, okay, what's common about them? You know, maybe you have a similar memory that happens, you know, basically the same way every time. What's the most intense thing about that? Just jot it down, whatever comes to mind. Let your subconscious bring this up to you. And you do it by listening. Just listen. Let it come up. Don't judge. Don't say, oh, that's not really related. You know, it's the holidays, and, you know, this happened in July where if something comes up, and it comes in that same stream of thought and feeling. Step 3 on this, when you have these memories related to this issue. Now, again, if you have 10 of these holiday issues, just start with one. Make it easier on yourself. And then do the same process as you finish each one. It's one way to go. It's up to you. But once you have these memories, you know, rate the intensity 0 to 10. I think I already mentioned that, but go ahead and rate the intensity 0 to 10. 10 being the most intense. If it's a 22, go ahead and write it down, 22. And then step 4, Mr. Phizackerley is going to step in for you and do the rest. Well, he's not going to do it in person. Sorry. Are you, Tim? That's not part of it, right?
Am I?
No, okay.
I
didn't want to speak for you either way. Okay, I'm joking. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you have any comment? Go ahead.
No, I was wondering whether I was going to get a look in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, obviously Jeff's explained that it's a good idea to work with a memory of something that's happened. So obviously as we approach the holiday season, if there's something such as shopping that fills you with dread, it's easier to work with a memory of something that happened in the past. Although, to a certain extent, there is mileage in thinking about what's upcoming more. Because for things like shopping or putting up the Christmas tree decorations, those sorts of things, once that's gone and it's in the past, it may not carry a huge amount of stressful feelings in terms of a memory because it's out of the way. But because you know you're going to have to do certain things in the future as part of the holiday season, in some ways it can be better to imagine what's upcoming. So what Jeff suggested is absolutely correct, because obviously we only dread the things that happen in the future because we've already had experience of it in the past. So really the negative emotion is attached to the memory. So it's a good way to work with it, but if when you think about the memory there's not a huge amount of emotion there, but you're looking at what's upcoming, and yes, the feelings are attached to that, then I would suggest to work with something imagined. What's going to happen is that your subconscious mind, to fill in the blanks and to fill in the detail, will draw on past experience anyway. And as I explained on the very first tutorial that goes out with the free system, as soon as you imagine something in the future, it's already a memory, and your mind really can't tell the difference between the one and the other. So that really, I think, is probably worth saying. Yes, we're advocating working with memories because it's the memories that have taught us how to feel about certain things. But if when you're looking at what's upcoming, it's what's imagined in the future, oh, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do that, I'm going to have to do all of these different things, and those are the things that carry the feelings of stress and anxiety, it's absolutely fine to imagine that situation or scenario and just to draw on the past in order to fill in the detail. It's more or less the same thing, and you get a great result. So what Jeff's explained there is really that we don't want to look at what's upcoming in a general sense. We break it down into small parts. We've got this bulleted list of things which you can work through. Take one or two or all of them if you want to, whichever apply. Any work you do to clear those negative feelings is going to help you as you get through the holiday season. And the more you do, the better it's going to be. So this is really what Jeff was saying about home play. We're not doing the next webinar on this, I think, until December the 8th or something. It's about another month. Well, that's plenty of time to work through some of these things. But if the memory doesn't carry the charge, imagine it as being upcoming and work on it in that way. Now, Jeff, I've got no idea which slide we're on. So are you able to tell me what slide number it is?
14.
We're on 14?
Yeah.
All right, okay.
We're zipping along.
Gosh. I'm on 16.
Oh, you are? Well, I went out of order. I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad.
No, that's absolutely fine, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so yeah, for each of those memories, you rate the intensity 0 to 10, or if it's something imagined, do it that way, and get those down as low as possible. And I know some people listening will have heard this before, but we're conscious of the fact that some people are relatively new to percussive suggestion and they're not necessarily used to all principles. And we want to make sure that this is useful and inclusive for everybody. Right. Okay. So probably the thing to do now, Jeff, is to move on to these common holiday issues or stresses.
Yeah. Well, I already went through those. Yeah.
Oh, you've already gone through those. That's why I'm on the wrong slide.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry about that. That's absolutely fine.
Well, step 4 that on this, when you have some idea of some either imagined events or memories, is you run the click tracks on these for each one. You may have to run the click track more than once per memory. Run them till they get down to 0 to 1 intensity. And it doesn't have to be 0. Actually, go ahead, sir.
Actually, Jeff, I was going to say something quite important here is that what we're advocating is running the click tracks on these things at the moment. And when we get to the next webinar, we're going to talk about how to use PSTEC Positive in some quite specific ways for some of these particular things, and to give you particular PSTEC Positive suggestions. The other thing I think that needs to be said, Jeff, especially for anybody who's relatively new to percussive suggestion, is that if there is a lot to work through, it's probably best not to just hammer away at the free click tracks. It's a good idea to mix in things like the enhanced effectiveness audios that you can find on PSTEC Level 1.
Right.
Actually, additionally, and it's just made me, it's just brought thought to mind, where we were talking about, or where I was talking about, memories that maybe don't carry a huge amount of charge, but if you actually think about what's upcoming, it's like, oh my word, I'm going to have to do that all over again, is that sometimes it can be useful to use the accelerators as well, because they stimulate recall, and that can really connect you to the feelings. So, you know, by all means use the free click tracks, but if you've got the accelerators or the EEFs, be sure to mix them in. You'll get better, faster results. Okay, so, but we will be talking about some very specific PSTEC Positive suggestions for some of these issues. But the most important thing really is to do the groundwork. Jeff used the analogy of sort of a floor with clean bits, dirty bits. You know, I use different metaphors and ways of explaining the same thing, but basically we're talking, you simply cannot use positive suggestions without clearing away some of the feelings of negativity first. You know, we've talked about that on lots and lots of different things as well. So that's why we want to. That's why we're presenting it in this order. It's to encourage you to use the click tracks on these things first, and then in the next webinar we'll make sure we give you some really specific PSTEC Positive suggestions. Okay, so Jeff, where are we at now? What do you want to do next?
I go to 17.
Okay.
I did want to.
Do you want some very specific examples? I mean, would it be useful if I gave some specific examples?
Well, we have some questions coming up, so we could use it on those.
Okay.
But I wanted to highlight one thing that you said that really stuck with me was the memories teach us how to behave, how to act, how to respond, how to react. And I think that's interesting because I know, again, we want to throw in PSTEC Positive and teach our mind a new way. But if there's too much of the, for lack of a better word here, the old way, they go in conflict. And quite often, and that's why people don't see a lot of progress. And I guess that's why we're really trying to emphasize this emotional work initially, especially with stressful type of situations and aspects that we're talking about, holidays and otherwise.
Yeah, it is absolutely essential. On this list of common holiday issues or stresses, there is one thing that I would like to mention, Jeff, and that's on this thing with spending time with people I genuinely hate. And I know, because I've discussed this with quite a number of people, that is not at all uncommon. Right. Now, there's more than one way to use the click tracks on something like that. In the instances where I've spoken to people about it, it's because there's been, you know, family bust-ups or not uncommonly things like abuse, which rather than put it into the sort of public domain was covered up, sort of kept quiet. And that can be really, really problematic for people because they find themselves coming face to face with these relatives over and over and over again. And obviously for people who are in that position, that really does put a big dampener on the whole holiday season because it's a major, major thing. And so if that is a factor in anybody's anxiety about the holidays, I would say whatever you do, deal with it. There are obviously different ways to deal with it, one of which is not necessarily to be pressured into seeing those people in the first place. If that's not avoidable, then the best thing to do is to deal with the feelings of hatred first rather than think about the upcoming event. It's a much more efficient way to do it. I mean, you could click track, imagine that event, imagine that person being there, and click track that, but the best thing to do is to click track the feelings of hatred for that person in a sort of non-specific sense. If it relates to events in the past, which almost certainly will do if there's very powerful feelings there, rather than thinking about what's upcoming in the future and having to meet them, I would suggest it's far better to think about what happened and click track the hatred there. It's going to produce a far better outcome. So that was something that I did really want to talk about, Jeff. And the other thing, actually, on here, cold weather and holiday season infections, I think we also probably ought to say that if somebody's got anxiety about that, absolutely click track it, because on the common cold package that I produced, I talked about something called psychoneuroimmunology, and essentially it's been found that even for things like illnesses, expectations make a big difference in terms of outcome. Now, I used to get tons and tons of colds, and they were always really bad. Now, I get hardly any, and if I do get a cold, I'm unlucky if it lasts more than a day and a half. I never expected I'd be able to say that. But one of the primary things that I talk about in that package is expectations. If somebody's fearful of something, then they tend to think about it. And if they're thinking about it and they're fearful of it, they think about it in a negative way. That creates a negative expectation, and that can adversely affect your health. So that, again, yes, it's not actually it's quite a good idea if somebody gets a lot of colds and so forth to click track any anxiety about going through Christmas with a cold. But by far the best thing to do would be to download that common cold system, because it's not designed to be used when somebody's unwell. It's designed to be used in advance. That it contains tools which create the correct expectations. It was very much an experiment when I put that together, Jeff. I wasn't sure how well it would work, but certainly for me, definitely it's worked incredibly well. When my family got swine flu, I was barely affected. It was incredible. But if somebody doesn't want to buy that package, definitely a good idea, if they get regular colds, or if it's very often an issue that they'll get a cold over the Christmas season, which does make things pretty miserable, it has to be said, then click track it at least, because once you get any anxiety down to a zero, that changes the expectation, and it makes it much less likely that the subconscious will affect their immunity in some way, which is exactly what happens. That's what the research shows. So there was just a couple of things there. Another one here, feelings of isolation and loneliness. Again, right at the start, Jeff, you talked about this thing about not wanting to focus on the negative things, just, this idea that, it'll just make it worse. No, the whole point of working through click tracks for things that are negative or frightening or anxiety-provoking is that you get, by actually focusing on it, you get the chance to interrupt it so it's no longer a problem. But in terms of the PSTEC positive work that we're going to suggest in the next webinar, it's important to make sure that that groundwork is cleared. It's got to be done. So just a couple of points there, Jeff, that's all.
Excellent. When it comes to the immune system or anything within the body, a lot of it has to do with expectation. When I have worked on physical issues, I would first address the emotional issue, whatever that might be, and then go into PSTEC positive with expectation of healing, healing, and feeling better or whatever that might be. So again, it's the same process, and what you're going to find as we talk about these different issues, and when we go through some of these questions here in a little bit, the formula, if you will, the process, it's very similar. There are some little differences here and there, absolutely. But always keep in mind that basic tenet of addressing the emotions with the click tracks, and then you can get into changing the beliefs and behaviors. In other words, your intention, your expectation with PSTEC positive and other hypnotic aspects. Okay, a special note, because what we noticed with the survey from people was life is about relationships. A lot of the complaints had to do with other people. In other words, because I remember somebody I used to work with years ago he says, I love this business. I'd love doing what we're doing. He says, I love doing this business if it wasn't for customers. So many times, a lot of these stresses involve other people and relationships. So keep a couple things in mind here. When you get yourself right within yourself, when you get yourself right, your orientation, your mind model, how to deal with things in an empowered way and without stress and peacefully and with joy, you make better decisions. So then you can have your relationships right. And then you get your world right. Relationships are so often the bottom line of everything. And not just people, how I relate to people, but places and things, everything. So keep that in mind in terms of your relationships. Now, what I also say is you cannot achieve success alone in relationships. You must seek success for them as well. Now, I wanted to just mention this little side note. That doesn't mean you have to get along with everybody. That doesn't mean you have to sit and have Christmas dinner with them necessarily, or coffee, or whatever. It doesn't mean that. You'll know what's right for you when you're right within yourself. So I just wanted to kind of heighten your awareness to looking at the relationships in terms of telling you, hey, what do I need to work on here? If this is stressing me, I need to work on this stress regarding this relationship. And what I've found is if I had a stressful relationship, whatever that might be, when I clear up the stress and I'm no longer stressed about it, if the relationship is no longer needed or something that's not best for me, it tends to just kind of fade away. It leaves, or I leave it somehow, but peacefully. So, utilize that kind of those thoughts and perceptions just to give you a little clue on, how do I approach this? Where do I go in with this? Okay. Here's some common questions that have come up, speaking of family and relatives and relationships that have come up. When my family visits, especially with the young ones, the noise, the mess, the chaos will be stressful. How do I become more tolerant of the mess my family makes in my home when they stay over? What do you think, Tim?
Well, I think people can probably guess what we're going to say there, but I want to actually suggest something that's not PSTEC related initially, and that is to consider the alternative. Sometimes it can be quite helpful to imagine the opposite of something problematic. So in this instance, when my family visits, especially with young ones, the noise and mess, the chaos will be stressful. If you imagine the opposite of that, the fact that, you might never see those young ones, is that any better? And that's a thought that's worth having in advance, because you know, we're going to say, yes, click track this. Imagine that the mess, the chaos, the aspects of it that really, really wind you up, and clear those in advance before that ever happens. And like you know, we said that this is why we're suggesting that people undertake this work now before we get into the holiday season. If you click track that now, it's far less likely to be an issue under the, you know, when it actually happens. So this is about prevention rather than cure in the moment. Although we are actually going to give you something that you can use in the moment as well, and I think that's coming up on the next webinar. But for things like this, especially with something where maybe people get stressed about something negative but attached to something really positive, you know, it's common for people to love their family and, you know, the youngsters that come with them, but hate certain aspects of what that brings, like the mess and the chaos and the noise and all the rest of it. Click track those things, but also imagine the alternative, which is those children not existing, you know, and there being no mess and chaos because nobody wants to visit, or, you know, and that can lead you towards the idea of gratitude, and that can be very, very helpful as well. So it's not just, there's more to this than just click tracking it. There are other ways to deal with some of these things, but click tracking it is well worth doing, because in the moment, if you've already click tracked it, it's not likely to be an issue anyway. Unreasonable relatives, you know, how do you get through a holiday meal with people you can't stand? Again, I go back to what I'd said there. The best thing to do is to click track the feelings towards those relatives, not necessarily with that scenario in mind, although you could do. The best thing to do is to click track the events that led to you not being able to stand those people. It's a more efficient way to go about it, but you could do either. So there again, I mean, there's a couple of concrete examples there just to illustrate the point that, you know, practically everything can be click tracked as long as there's a negative feeling attached to it. It's better to do it in advance than it is to wait for it to actually happen. And by creating a bullet pointing list of all the things about the holiday season that stress you out and click tracking them, you're going to be far better prepared for it. I think you'll be amazed at the difference and really enjoy the holiday season, which after all is the whole point.
You know, it's interesting because when you said prior to doing the click track, think about not seeing the little ones, you know, the grandchildren or children, whatever the case is. And that's about, in a way, setting an intention. In other words, you're directing your mind to not go in the direction of, okay, it's terrible, let's just eliminate him, which is not where usually the person wants to go. And this reminds me a little bit of an experience I had with my family, which, you know, through divorces and aspects, it seemed like the family was a bit splintered, at least in my mind. And my initial, as I sat with that for a while, and this was several years ago, I sat with that for a while within myself. I didn't tell anybody else about this at the time. And I started thinking, okay, what do I really want? And I thought, okay, well, I want a family that's communicating, talking, and enjoying it for the most part as much as possible, and, you know, having some closeness, at least, hey, we can rely on each other kind of thing. And I forget exactly how I, you know, worded it or whatnot. It's been a while. And I just started moving in the direction with that. And then when I saw stresses and other aspects, I would clear them up. And then it became, when it came to my children, etc., I thought, okay, I want to be a resource to them in the best ways possible. And I started looking at that. I didn't tell anybody I was doing this. And ultimately, I started clearing away the emotional issues and moving in that direction, and things turned out wonderfully. So it's about the execution of what you want. And I was able to do that by not reacting and clearing up emotional things. And it was wonderful because the family is such a great place that exposes your junk. I mean, who knows you better and can push your buttons more, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. Let's see. Here's another one. How do I deal with the expectations from family members? How do I deal with family members who try and overpower me? You know, how do I stay calm when they want to delve into my life deeply and they want to give their comments and tell me how to fix it, such as, you must, you have to, you will. What do you think, Tim?
That's a great question, isn't it? We've all been there.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Maybe it's just me. Okay, how do you deal with family members who try to overpower me? But speaking for myself, that tends not to happen because I'm quite forceful anyway. But I think, Jeff, the answer to that one is to use PSTEC in a more general sense, because that's only really likely to be a major issue for somebody who has been through a lot of that, and that's likely to be connected with things like confidence issues. You know, nobody wants to be a doormat, and it's really important not to be. So I think the best approach is not, I mean, yes, it could be that with something like that, there's fear attached to it. You know, the fear of being bossed around, told what to do, feelings of anger, resentment, guilt possibly in allowing it to happen. For something like that, I think probably that is going to be very, very individual specific. I mean, it's too general a question. How do I deal with family members who try to overpower me? The thing to do, if that happens, if you think that's likely to be an issue, is to think about the feelings that creates. Now, each of those feelings can be click-tracked if you imagine that scenario, but you need to be specific about what feelings that creates. Better, I think, to work on confidence generally. And obviously I talk about that in PSTEC Level 1 and some of the other tutorials, how to work on things like confidence and so forth. But if we're just dealing with that specific question, how do I deal with family members who try to overpower me, imagine it happening and, you know, and make a list of the emotions that you know you would feel under those circumstances. The other thing, of course, is to direct that click-track work to the family members most likely to do that. So, in other words, you need to be as specific as possible. It's always best to deal with things in a specific way rather than a general way. So, again, the thing to do is to make sure that if that's imagined and it's click-tracked, imagine it in a specific way. Fine to deal with it, you know, if it's happened in the past, work with a memory. I very often get people to imagine things in the future, because by imagining things you can add in all sorts of stuff that really make it horrendously bad. That actually is better in terms of clearance than just working with something which is, you know, maybe a 5 or a 6. Throw whatever you need to in there to get it to a 10, and click track that. It's the best way to do it. How do I stay calm when someone in my family looks to delve too deeply into my life, and then dish out commands on how to fix it? Again, the same advice applies. Decide which people in the family are most likely to do that. Create in your mind and imagine specific instances. You know, be as specific as you can be, and then really, really try to feel those feelings and click track those. And by doing that, I think that is probably the best way to deal with it, Jeff, in the short term. But the best thing really is to work on things like confidence, and that requires a more general use of percussive suggestion, and, you know, whatever other tools anybody wants to use.
Yeah,
Is that helpful?
yeah, and what I've seen in several people in the past that I've worked with is this subject of getting walked on, of being a doormat. When we're compelled to be a people pleaser is one example, then those kind of things can happen. A lot of people hold their anger because they think they're going to get walked on if they don't have anger to defend themselves. And I've actually not rejected per se, but didn't work with people because they just said, no, I'm not willing to get rid of this anger. So this, like Tim says, this goes back to a real core belief and mind model aspect that says, you know, I have to comply, or if I don't comply, then they won't like me. These kind of conclusions that the mind comes up with. And again, start with emotions. Go ahead.
Actually, Jeff, can I add something else in there
Absolutely.
that's just sprung to mind? One of the other things here is that it's not just feelings about that happening. It's what the outcome would be if they stand up to them. Yeah. And so fear could be something that would be very, very worthwhile in click tracking under those circumstances. So if we go back to how do I deal with family members who try to overpower me, yes, by all means, click track that, you know, either a memory or an imagined scenario, throwing in, you know, making it as extreme as possible so that you can really, really clear that emotion out. The other thing that you can do, which would be worthwhile, is to imagine the outcome if you stand up to that family member and say no. What would happen? Now, one of the reasons why the subconscious will sometimes allow somebody to be a doormat, or to be trampled on, is because they've got fear of what would happen if they don't act in that way. So the other thing to do there is to imagine the possible outcome of standing up to that person and saying, no, you're not going to do this to me again, and click track that scenario. That would be a really, really useful thing to do. It's likely that there'd be feelings of anxiety or fear. Click track those. I could see that working very, very well indeed.
How to stay positive when others are full of stress? Well, when you do this kind of emotional work and you clear away these aspects, you are able to be that kind of peaceful place for everyone else, actually. And to me, it's about becoming imperturbable, where the world seems to be swirling around in chaos, if you will, especially when it comes to family and the holidays. But you know, you can sit and just kind of observe it. You find yourself more observing and noticing things than getting embroiled within, you know, into the drama and into everything that's going on. And it actually puts you in a nice position in another place. And that's how you do it. Your mind model doesn't have to respond. If someone says, well, you ought to do this, you know, it's the end of the year, you ought to finish this and then do this next year. How to stay positive is you just kind of shrug your shoulders in those kind of situations. That's one response. And go, oh, okay, well, thanks for the suggestion. And you move on. It's that simple. And it can be simple. What I've found when I did a lot of my emotional work years ago was as I got rid of these emotional hooks in me that were put there by my mind, my subconscious, etc., a lot of these issues just kind of fell away. I'd still be around people that are, let's call it, embroiled in the drama now and then, depending on the situations based on my choices. But I didn't get pulled into the drama. I could actually be a resource sometimes. So that's how you stay positive, is you're neutralizing these emotional hooks that are coming about. This one was interesting, Tim. How can I mix the generations happily?
Well, I'm hoping you've got an answer on that one, Jeff.
Well, you know,
that's not something I've really had to deal with.
A lot That's an intention. We were talking about intention a couple questions ago here, about the intention of, okay, I have these kids coming over, everything's noisy, it's chaotic. All right, what's the alternative? Is not seeing them. Well, I want to see them. That's an intention. Put out that intention of mixing the generations happily. All right. Begin to look at when people are not getting around, they're not merging well, et cetera. And I kind of touched on this, and that's kind of the issue that I had. When I was talking about my family, there was me, and there's my kids and my parents. And it's not that nobody expressed hatred or any of those things, but there wasn't a real closeness, if you will, and it began to become more close because my intention was, hey, I want this to mix somehow. I want this to get along. Now, it might not be best friends kind of thing because the diversity of the people are, like if you look at my parents and myself, it's night and day. And even amongst my children are very, very different. So how do I mix these generations happily? That's an intention that you put forward. And if you're clearing your emotional issues to the conflicts that may be there, you can then become a resource to making that happen. Your mind will come together and say, okay, my intention is to have these generations mix happily. All right. You will begin to know what to do in the best scenario possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me, Jeff. Actually, just thinking about it, I think that that's probably something we can provide a really, really good PSTEC positive statement on.
Yeah.
Do you remind me for next time? Because the subconscious is absolutely marvelous at coming up with solutions as long as the requirement is given to it. And I think there, PSTEC positive could be really, really useful.
Okay.
So I'm going to have a think about the statements that we would use there.
Good.
I know the next one on your slide is one of my sisters has terminal cancer. How does the family deal with this? If she is still with us, it will be our last Christmas. How do we celebrate? If she leaves us before, how can we get through it? Well, there's quite a lot there. I mean, I could talk for half an hour on that because, I faced that personally. In 2007, when my wife, before she had her second liver transplant, she had chronic liver failure, chronic rejection. She was given 3 weeks to live, and that was about 3 weeks before Christmas. So I can relate to that one very, very well. For me and for her, one of the things that we did was we took the attitude that it wasn't terminal and that she was going to get through it. And as it turned out, that was the right attitude to take. She continued quite happily, although she was in an absolutely shocking state, for about 2.5 months before she was able to get a transplant. And the hospital didn't think that she would survive it, but she did. And that was very much about beliefs. But for me, it was about focusing on the present, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the future, just to focus on and enjoy the present. Now, obviously she wasn't very well, but at the same time she was there and I was happy to be with her. So it's a personal and practical tip, is if something is absolutely inevitable like that, if the doctors have said this is terminal, well, we've always questioned that. It's happened twice. We questioned that. We just don't accept it and create a different reality. Now, I know not everybody is able to do that, but it's a helpful mental stance to take, is that, the doctors don't always get it right. They talk about their expectations are based on experience, just as our feelings are based on experience, and sometimes people with terminal cancer get better, or they last a lot longer than they expect to, and especially so if they have the right beliefs. So I would say under those circumstances, the most important thing to do is not to dwell on the problem, but to simply enjoy being with them. If there's a lot of fear and anxiety connected to it, then by all means click track those things. But speaking from personal experience, I would say don't necessarily accept what you're told. It's not always correct. We know that from personal experience. If we'd accepted it, I'm sure Karen would be dead by now. But if you are absolutely convinced it's inevitable, then imagine the outcome and click track the feelings. And that will allow you to go through the holiday season feeling much better about it than you would do otherwise.
I think, yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing in those regards. And it might not be popular sometimes, but, you know, there's that fear. It's along that subject of fear of failure. So the fear of the worst outcome. And again, it's not focusing. Some people may say, well, I don't want to focus on it and I'll make it happen. Well, that's not true. If you're focusing on it to heal the fear, to neutralize the fear, then you'll be able to let go of the fear of that happening. And then what you're able to do, because as like Tim said, I mean, you're not sure, is she going to be here at Christmas after? I mean, how long? They don't know. If you are able to neutralize the fear of that future event, whatever that might be, good, or, you know, the worst or maybe not as good, etc., you're able to be more in the present now, your mind, and whatever time you do have left, you're able to be there completely and make that time the best possible that it could be. And you might even be, you know, privy within yourself to some solutions maybe, or the best thing to do in that moment. You leave yourself open for more possibilities is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, you do, Jeff. And one of the things that I would like to add there is that, as I said before, fear creates expectations. Where somebody's very fearful of something, what they tend to do is imagine that fear, and it goes round and round and round in their mind. They're constantly imagining it. That creates an expectation. And what the mind expects to happen is generally realized. I personally know a therapist in America who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he amazed the doctors by defying their prognosis. Even before he began their conventional treatment, his tumor was reducing in size quite significantly, and they scratched their heads, couldn't make any sense of it. But that would definitely not have happened if he'd had the expectation that this tumor was going to kill him. And so, you know, I'm not saying don't explore conventional medicine at all. I'm saying, I mean, personally, I would take everything that they could throw at me. What I am saying, though, is if you get rid of the fear, it allows you to have an expectation which can help you to have a different outcome. It might happen, it might not, but what's somebody got to lose? Nothing, in my opinion. And like I said, again, speaking from personal experience, my wife was given 3 weeks to live, and almost 10 weeks later, she seemed to be no worse. We figured that we could have gone on another 10 weeks, and maybe another 10 weeks after that, before she got a transplant. We just decided dying wasn't an option, and so we dealt with the fear, and that allowed us to change our expectation. It's the best way, you know, and that is from personal experience. Deal with the fear. That allows you to change the expectations. And, you know, even if it doesn't mean that person lives any longer, at least you're not going to spend those remaining weeks, months, whatever that precious time is, you're thinking in a negative way. It allows you to enjoy the time you've got left. It's a much, much better way to be.
Yeah. And
the click tracks can allow you to do that. So it's very, very important to clear things like that. Yes, people, as we know from the correspondence, yes, people have a natural tendency to want to steer clear of the things which frighten them, upset them, all the rest of it, because they're under the misapprehension that by not doing that, or by avoiding it, somehow the problem is going to go away. Well, it just doesn't work like that. But these tools are designed, the click tracks are designed to free people from those feelings. So whatever you do, click track them. Yeah.
We already talked about imagined events quite a bit, and so I just want to remind you, and we just gave you some examples as well. You can use PSTEC to head off potential stresses coming up on your holiday schedule. You know, if you have bad experiences with holidays over and over again, basically what you're doing is, and you just, you know, keep them there and you hold them. You don't release them. You don't neutralize them. You don't shift the belief system around them. You're basically rescheduling that holiday stress to reoccur. So when you have this upcoming holiday event, whatever it may be, whatever's in your mind, or other upcoming event, doesn't have to be a holiday event. You know, had a question on here about somebody having to do a speech coming up, and then I said, I'll answer you offline, but it's another great example. I have this speech, a very important business speech to do in a couple weeks. I'm really nervous. All right, how do you feel about that event? Are there any unpleasant feelings above a 0? Click track, imagining that, while you imagine that event, any unpleasant feelings that you have until they go down to 0, 1. Remove the fear or the anxiety or the nervousness, or it could be all three. You might have to, sometimes you have to click track separately 2 different emotions. Like you'll click track the anxiety and then you still have fear, and then you click track the fear, sometimes anger. So imagine those scenarios happening, coming in this holiday season or any time, and use the click track on them.
Can I throw something in there, Jeff, as well? Sorry.
Fire away.
Can I throw something in there?
Yes.
For something like a speech, yes, absolutely, it's fine to click there, imagine it, and click there. Try to hold on to the feelings of fear, anxiety, whatever it is that would normally be felt or is felt in advance of that, and click track that. But again, the most efficient way to use the tracks is to make that event extreme in some way. So it could be that it's not so much making a speech, it could be the idea of making mistakes while making a speech, or looking foolish. So you might want to throw in a mistake in the imagined event, getting something wrong, and click track that. It's the more specific and targeted you are with your click track work, the better the outcome's going to be. So yeah, for most people, just imagining it and trying to hold on to the fear and anxiety will make a huge difference anyway. Again, that's something that once you've done that, you would use PSTEC Positive. But if the anxiety is about making mistakes or looking foolish or those sorts of things, then you need to click track that aspect as well. It's worth doing.
Somebody asked how to get a good night's sleep during stressful times. I get some sleep, but not very long. Doesn't seem restful. What can I do? Quite often I've worked with people that had sleeping issues. That wasn't really the issue we were dealing with, but it was part and parcel to their, I guess you could call it like a symptom. And a lot of times when a lot of these anxieties are cleared up, neutralized, etc., having restful sleep is a natural progression from that. You're able to get sleep now because the anxiety's not there. When I shifted my perception on money issues years and years ago, long time ago though, prior to that, there was always anxiety. Oh, is there going to be enough? Even when there was plenty. But one of the things was, and I never really addressed sleep, per se, when I addressed the money issues over a certain space of time, and when I reflected back, I noticed, oh, I don't have any sleeping problems anymore. Interesting. So one of the things you can also do quite often, and this is an optional package, is the accelerator package has a relaxation track. Has a couple of them, actually. And sometimes our mind is just running 100 miles an hour. So sometimes that can help. You can do that right before you go to sleep, or as you go to sleep, you just listen, to the accelerator as you follow the instructions on there, of course. Kind of imagine the best scenario and then just relax into it and let it calm your mind down a little bit. Sometimes that'll work. Do you have anything to add to that, Tim?
Well, yeah, Joe. I mean, I was going to say there's a couple of things. Yes, it's absolutely worth doing that, because the purpose of all the accelerators, the tapping accelerators, and also the relaxational ones, are to speed your progress with percussive suggestion in any way. So what they actually do, the way they're designed to work, is to create suggestions, install beliefs, and so forth, which subsequently allow other tracks to work at peak efficiency, which allows you to work through more stuff more quickly. I know that some people have said, well, I don't really want to use the relaxational accelerators because I don't really feel as though I'm doing anything. Obviously, I created them for a reason. I created them to speed progress and to make percussive suggestion work even better than it does anyway. Those relaxational accelerators are designed to be used sort of last thing at night, but a very practical thing. I know, Jeff, you've got a PDF all about insomnia, haven't you? I'm not sure exactly where it is on the website, or whether it's on your side or not.
Yeah.
But the most practical piece of advice I would give to anybody who isn't sleeping well would be to do a more general clearance, the kind of thing that's described on PSTEC Level 1, because that does definitely allow people to have a great night's sleep. I mean, we both know, because of the people we work with, that as they clear their problems, they start to sleep better anyway. In the short term, though, the best thing to do is to pick whatever is the most pressing thing. Maybe something awful that's happened that day. Click track that. It's going to take, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. That's better than being awake for 2 hours. If somebody wakes up through the night, there's absolutely nothing to stop them sticking a relaxational accelerator on and then listening to that as they go back to sleep. There's all sorts of different ways of going about it. There's like a quick fix, which is basically to deal with the things that are most pressing. The proper solution, though, is to deal with stress and anxiety and all of the things that have accumulated over the years, and that requires a more systematic clear out by means of percussive suggestion. Or if somebody's using other things like EFT, whatever, that as well.
Yeah, sometimes in the moment, those are good things, like you said. Just click track the nervousness, and then I've had people do that. They just focused on, well, why am I not sleeping? My mind's racing. I'm nervous. I'm about blank. Well, they click tracked on imagining blank with the nervousness, and they were able to get sleep for the night. Of course, that's in the moment, and it helps to then, when it's not middle of the night, begin to look at the real cause of all this. Why are you nervous all the time? How do I get everything done? Obligation, sorting stuff when I return home, putting things back together after the holidays. Well, I would say do it. No, I'm just kidding. I think usually when people look at the overwhelm, I got so much to do. God, how am I going to get it all done? Is on the emotional side, well, number one, there's two ways that I would go. Number one, take a look at that overwhelm and that anxiety. Imagine doing all this stuff, and that's kind of an imagined event, again, and click track it. Also, though, I would have someone take a look at, okay, imagine not doing it, click track the fear of not doing it, but also find out if you don't do it, what's going to happen. So you have another imagined event there. So there's three kind of parts to that you can go. And I mentioned three. It might not be three for everybody. It might only be one or two, but it could be. Those are some of the options there. But then PSTEC Positive would come in handy about being able to get things done in a peaceful manner.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other things there, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Something interesting sprang to my mind when you were talking there. One of which was to imagine what would happen if you didn't do it.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Now, if you imagine that and you get negative feelings attached to that, don't click track them, because the sort of anxiety about what would happen if you don't do it would actually be, in some ways, quite a positive thing, because it's going to create a motivation to get stuff done. If somebody has no feelings about, the idea of not getting anything done, then there's no motivation to do it. So in some ways, there are some instances in which a negative outcome can actually be quite useful. So you wouldn't always want to click track it. So that was one thing. The other thing is, yes, PSTEC Positive. PSTEC Positive suggestions that you'll be motivated, you'll undertake things in the correct sequence. Just make a start. Just making a start on something is very often leads to getting the whole thing done. That's practical advice. It's like, how do you write a book? The first thing you do is, pick up a piece of paper and a pencil, break it down into small steps. Once you start breaking things down into really, really small steps, they start to get easier. Again, writing a book is a great example. Some people have the belief that they could never, ever do that. But if they actually say, okay, what's the thing that's stopping you? I don't know. Okay, what's the first step then? Well, I need a pen and paper. Okay, get a pen and paper. Do you have an idea what this is about? Well, yes. Okay, write a little thing about what it's about and just break it down into small steps. Again, you can use PSTEC Positive to create, to build suggestions to encourage that. The other thing there, Jeff, is obviously there's PSTEC Magic Sentences for procrastination as well. Now,
good point.
It's just sprung to mind. That could be a useful addition.
How do I deal with feelings of resentment that I'm the one who does everything?
Well, there's two aspects to that, aren't there? There's a belief there, the belief
right.
that they do everything, and there's also the emotional side to it. Beliefs and emotions are intimately connected, as I have explained, in all sorts of different tutorials. If anybody wants to fully understand the connection between beliefs and emotions, PSTEC Positive Secrets is the place to look, really, and that also got a PDF in there, and so you don't have to listen to it, you can read it as well. But I would look at the beliefs there. If somebody has a belief that they're doing absolutely everything and nobody else is doing nothing, then it's sort of understandable maybe that there'd be some resentment. I mean, you can still click track it, but it's likely that that's not the case. If it is, then maybe a change in behaviour is required. Again, PSTEC Positive might be quite useful there. So I don't think there's one easy answer to that one, Jeff.
Yeah, because there are the issues of why is the person doing everything, or has the perception that they're doing everything. And again, there's all sorts of secondary gain aspects, which we've touched on with some of these other issues. If you didn't do everything, what would that look like, and how would that feel, and what would the effect be on you? So, yeah, it's a little more of a complex issue. And again, like I said, the holidays do bring up things and aspects of ourselves, and that's why it's a good thing to look at. But it could go deeper than just the holidays per se. I'm sure if somebody's doing everything around the holidays, I have a feeling they have that same kind of pervading feeling and thought throughout the year about other events and situations as well. Holiday travel and anxiety. I've worked with many people in terms of plane travel. I don't know which kind of travel they're talking about here. So, as well as travel, other than plane, like car and whatnot. And sometimes it's very simple. I've just used click tracks basically, and barely or really didn't even get into PSTEC Positive much. It really depends on the situation. There was a wonderful interview with Liz on the site where she had difficulty traveling anywhere, and then started traveling all over. That took a little longer, and part of it was the anger emotion was in the way. How that affects that's why it's so important to look at these emotional issues when they come up. And I've had even people comment in session that says, oh, that doesn't bother me much. Okay, well, 0 to 10, what is it? Well, it's a 5. And it was, well, okay, a 5 is halfway there to, infinity, if you will, of just the highest that it could be. So don't ignore these things. Look at these anxieties, look at this nervousness and the stress that comes up. So,
Jeff?
Go ahead, sorry.
I think I'm right in thinking that on that most recent interview that you did with Peter Owen, he talked about somebody who'd had some kind of flying phobia, and that wasn't straightforward to resolve, and how he went about it. Now, was that the interview, or was that on PSTEC in the Trenches?
I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I think it might be in the interview. If it's not in the interview, it's definitely in PSTEC in the Trenches.
I don't remember it in the interview, but go ahead.
Oh, right, okay. Fair enough, because I was going to say, but that was a really, really interesting one.
Yeah.
Because he'd expected that, he could just click track the fear of flying and so forth, which for most people would work spectacularly well. Mm-hmm. But in that instance, there was a chap who it didn't seem to have worked for initially, and he talked about that. But I thought it was in the interview. It's obviously in PSTEC in the Trenches.
Yeah.
It's a good listen. If anybody hasn't got it, it's absolutely brilliant.
I think one of the questions to ask is, well, why are you anxious over traveling? What bothers you the most? And just begin to look at the reason why, because it could be, maybe it's not the plane itself or the car or whatever. It's the destination.
Or it could be confined spaces. Or it could be, when somebody's on if it's a long haul thing, it could be anxiety over, picking up some kind of germ or illness while they're on the aeroplane. Or there's lots and lots. You really need to be specific about what it is that you're anxious about, and not just be completely general with it.
Eliminate emotional eating. I mean, food's a big thing around the holidays, right? You have a lot of times things around that normally aren't around, including fruitcake, which I don't understand personally, but that's just me. But with that said, in fact, the comment with that question was, I can't imagine enjoying food as much without indulging. There's a belief.
Yeah.
So there's two parts: eliminate emotional eating, and then also, I can't imagine enjoying food as much without indulging. So, I mean, the emotional eating I've found is very, very effective with the click tracks. There's also the weight loss click track pack also that has specific tracks for weight loss per se. But just with the click tracks alone, or the EEFs or the accelerator tapping tracks, emotional eating, now there's two aspects here. You can imagine eating those wonderful things and that urge to do it, like a craving. And you can click track the craving. You just focus on the craving like, I got to have it, I got to have it. And I've done this with many people, and the craving's gone. With my experience, it's been very, very quick and simple and easy and long-lasting. But there could be other aspects here. I remember talking to somebody recently that felt compelled to eat around the family when the family got together. In fact, it was here in Hawaii. Because in Hawaii, it's a very big thing to get together with family and eat, whether it's holidays or not. And there was some of that thought, that fear that said, oh, they're going to look at me funny. They're going to wonder what's wrong with me. So those are a few things. And then I can't imagine enjoying food without indulging. Well, okay, imagine not indulging and the fear that comes with that, or whatever the feeling that comes up. And then you can begin to use PSTEC Positive on enjoying the food. So with this one particular person that I'm mentioning here in Hawaii, we imagined eating with the family and just eating a little bit of each, and just enjoying a little bit and still enjoying the family with PSTEC Positive, and she was able to get results with that as well. So there's a lot of ways you can go. Do you have anything to add real quick on that?
Yes, there's a couple of things. Your suggestion of, imagining the food and the good feelings that go with it and click tracking that is an excellent one that does work really, really well. I know I talked about that on the weight loss package. You can do it with the free tracks. You can also use the tracks on the weight loss package. The other thing to do is to consider that emotional eating can be for sort of generalized reasons or specific reasons. Sometimes people will eat emotionally because they've had a particularly bad day or something awful's happened, and it's like, I'm just going to reach for the food. Or it could be that somebody's eating emotionally on a sort of more habitual basis because of feelings about themselves, and that requires a more general clear out, and a much more thorough clear out. It's one of these things. There's lots and lots of different ways to go about it, all of which work well. I mean, we know they do. So yeah, identify which of those three is most likely to be the best approach for you and use it, I would say.
Yeah, I'm still here. I just took a drink on the mute. Sorry. We have some more questions, but I'm gonna wrap up here. What's that? Can you hear me okay now?
I was going to say I thought I'd been left in charge, but I've got no access to control.
We have some more questions, but I'm going to hold off, and then we're going to get this answered in some other way, because I want to wrap up here. We've gone a lot longer than we anticipated, and all the techie problems, etc. I did want to mention, though, as you go through this work the next 4 weeks, be aware of memories as they come bubbling up from the subconscious. The subconscious will present it to you. When you're focusing in a certain area, it will present to you the memories and imagined events with the feelings that are associated with the issue that you're working on. If the memory is unpleasant, click track it, neutralize it. Don't ignore it as, well, it's not really related. Something may come up that has nothing to do with the person you're thinking about, has nothing to do with the holidays. Don't judge it or define it. Respect the subconscious help that it's giving you. It's giving you communication. Click track it if it's unpleasant, if it's something that you want to neutralize and release and get rid of. As you work on imagined events with the click tracks, we've talked about that here today. Memories may arise again, with intensity. Note those and go ahead and click track those as well. So respect the communication that comes from the subconscious, and the more you do listen and respect that communication, the more valuable communication you're going to get. When we tend to suppress and, say, it's not relevant. Well, like, say like a child, like a young person. They go, okay, you're not going to listen to me. I'm not going to give you any more info. So, respect that information as it comes through and be aware. The common questions we have here, and we'll figure out the best time. We'll cover these in another way. They have to do with money, business, work, and giving gifts. So we'll have a way that we can give this to you in some way so that we can cover some of these common questions. It's getting a little late here for everybody. And so we're going to cover this and more in session 2. So some of the things like how do I get the right gift, those kind of things. How do I stay within a small budget? Money's tight. How can I eliminate the stress of feeling the lack of money? Actually, some of these questions, we've covered a lot on how you can do this already, but we do have this and more to be covered in the second session. How can I have more positive daydream? Go ahead.
I was going to say, Jeff, if people apply the principles that we've already spoken about to these sorts of questions, many of the answers should be self-explanatory now, I would hope.
Right.
But, yeah, we need to come back to those in some way.
Yeah, we'll come back to them. Now, some other questions came up. How can I have more positive daydreams? How can I start creating new and wonderful memories? How can PSTEC work throughout the day without needing an MP3 or recording all the time? How can I use PSTEC in the moment for stress? And how can PSTEC be used as a preventative measure to stop stress before it happens? Those are some of the things that we're going to cover in the next session in 4 weeks. But it's not going to have as much meaning to you if you don't release, clear, and neutralize those unpleasant emotions and feelings for as many memories and imagined events that you can prior to that. So it's really, really important that you take this information that we're talking about and not just keep it in the category of information, but put it in the category of your to-do list here. And I know it's a busy time, but you have a great opportunity here. If junk and stuff's coming up, now is the time to take care of it in this fashion. So session 2 in 4 weeks, 4 weeks from today, will be stress in the moment. Help! About setting intentions in PSTEC Positive, steps in using PSTEC in the moment to achieve quicker and longer lasting results, and an introduction to this optional track. Now, the track won't be free like, the webinar is, and it's not necessary. It's not, required. Just like clearing the emotional parts, you don't really have to buy anything. You could do it with the click tracks, but you're going to get quicker and move along with some of these tools that you can get as well. All right. So in the little box there.
Say, Jeff,
go ahead.
I'm really looking forward to hearing that because this is something actually very different, isn't it?
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
hypnotic track that we're making available is something that I put together, but you're recording it.
Yes.
So it's going to be a really, really interesting thing. I'm really, really keen to find out what people think of that because
right.
I think it'll be a great addition to the PSTEC arsenal. So
be sure to visit the web page, and I just put it in the chat box. For those that are online, you can click on there. That's where you'll find the video replay, and it'll give me a day or two on this because I'm going to have to play with it a little bit. The PDF handout will be there as well, and I'll also have a Q&A area. It's not quite there yet, but it will be in the next day or two. So visit that web link, and the website is www.PSTEC audio source. That's PSTEC, like PSTEC. Paul, Sam, Tom, Echo, Charlie, audio, like it sounds there, source, SOURCE.org/stress, STRESS, PSTECaudiosource.org/stress. I'll also email everybody that registered as well, so you'll have it. So we'll get all that info to you. we've covered already a lot of questions. We're going to have a question area on that page, so I'm not going to open it up for questions now, and we've really gone a long time anyway. I appreciate everybody that's been hanging on there and listening, and I hope it's all worthwhile. We will have a replay, of course, and I'll put it up with the video with the slides so you can see those. You will have a PDF handout with all these goodies. And so we're giving you a lot of resources and tools here to get this done and finally have a good, if you haven't before or haven't had very few, a good holiday. It'll put you in a position to have that stress-free holiday, okay? Do you have any fun comments or whatnot, Jim?
No, I'm just hoping that I'm hoping that on the next one we don't get the sound problems. I'm sure we won't do. Most uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I think it'll be good. I'm looking forward to doing some of the PSTEC positive stuff because I know it's something that people want to know about.
Absolutely.
But that's why it's important for us to have this sort of month-long gap between now and then, because it gives everybody listening the time to do the clearance work that applies to them. And that's really why we're putting that PSTEC positive section off, because it's important that you've actually got the time to do that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we've covered all sorts of different things. Again, like we said at the start, these principles can be applied not just to the holidays, but to every aspect of life and of using percussive suggestion. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you for setting it up, Jeff. And thank you to British Telecom for allowing my broadband to survive for what is actually quite a long time by my standards.
Yeah, you had a better time than I did. I don't know what's up here. The world is upside down. No, just kidding. Again, I thank you everybody as well for being with us here, for all the questions that have come in. We got a little bit more on this journey, but it's going to be fun and it's going to be really productive, and it's all about results. So we'll see you on the next session here in just a few weeks, session 2. Take good care in the meantime. Keep clicking on there, all right? And have a great weekend. Aloha.